The large meeting room fell silent as General Roberts walked to the front. His face was hard like stone. The hologram behind him showed a dark, strange planet. "This is DX-37, he said, pointing at the planet. "Our enemy, the Shadows, have built a secret base there. We must destroy it." Captain Marcus Black sat in the front row. He was tall with short brown hair and a scar across his cheek. He had fought in many battles and won medals for his bravery. The general called his name. "Captain Black, you will lead this mission. Take 500 of our best soldiers." Marcus stood up. "Yes, sir. What do we know about this planet?" The general touched a button and the hologram changed. It showed mountains, deep valleys, and strange forests with blue trees. DX-37 is what we call a Class 5 Deathworld. The air is toxic, the weather changes fast, and the animals there are very dangerous. Many soldiers in the room looked worried. A Class 5 Deathworld was the worst kind of planet anyone could visit. "Sir," a woman's voice called out. It was Dr. Elena Reed, the science officer. She was smart and careful. Her eyes were fixed on the data tablets in her hands. "These reports don't match. Something is wrong." The general frowned. "Your concerns are noted, Doctor, but there's no time for questions. The mission starts tomorrow." Later, in the equipment room, soldiers prepared their gear. They put on special armor that could protect them from the toxic air and extreme temperatures. Lieutenant Jack Cooper checked his weapons. He was young but skilled. "I heard this is a suicide mission," he whispered to Marcus. Marcus shook his head. "No mission is suicide if you're prepared. We go in, destroy their base, and come home. Simple." Dr. Reed approached them with worry on her face. "Captain, I found more problems in the reports. No one has ever returned from this planet. Not a single scout ship." "That's why they're sending us, Doctor," Marcus said with a small smile. "We're the best." Private Thomas Miller worked nearby, checking communication devices. He was the youngest in the team, but very good with technology. His hands moved fast, fixing and testing the equipment. "All comms are ready, Captain," he reported. The next morning, the soldiers boarded 15 large dropships. Each ship could carry about 35 soldiers. The ships were strong and built for dangerous landings. As they left the main ship, Marcus looked at the planet through the window. It looked dark and angry, with swirling storms covering half its surface. For the first time, he felt a small doubt in his mind. "Final checks," he ordered. "Weapons, air filters, emergency beacons. Test everything twice." The dropships entered the planet's atmosphere. They shook violently as they pushed through thick clouds. Suddenly, alarms rang out. "Sir, communications are failing," Miller shouted. "Electrical storm," the pilot yelled. "It's not on any of our charts." Marcus grabbed the radio. "All ships, stay in formation. Follow." A bright flash of light cut him off. 3 dropships on the right disappeared in balls of fire. 2 more spun out of control, falling fast toward the surface. "Brace for hard landing," Marcus shouted as their own ship began to lose power. The last thing Marcus saw before impact was Dr. Reed's face. She didn't look scared. She looked like someone who had expected this all along. Marcus opened his eyes to smoke and pain. His head hurt. Something warm ran down his face. Blood. The dropship lay broken around him, metal torn open like paper. "Report," he called out, his voice rough. "Who's alive?" One by one, soldiers moved in the wreckage. 15 from his ship had survived the crash. Outside, more survivors gathered from other ships. Lieutenant Cooper limped toward him. His face was dirty and scratched. 5 ships completely destroyed, sir. 3 more crashed badly. I count about 380 soldiers left. Marcus looked at the strange land around them. The sky was a sickly yellow color. Tall blue trees with sharp leaves stood nearby. The air smelled wrong even through his mask filter. "Where's Dr. Reed?" Marcus asked. "Here, Captain." The science officer appeared from behind a broken wing. She carried her data tablet, somehow still working. And I was right. This planet is worse than they told us. The air has chemicals not listed in the reports. Our filters will only last half as long as planned. Marcus nodded. Gather all survivors. We need to make a camp before dark. The soldiers collected what gear they could from the crashed ships. Many had lost weapons or parts of their armor. Private Miller worked to fix the communication systems. Bad news, sir, Miller said. The planet has some kind of magnetic field. It's blocking all signals to orbit. We can talk to each other on the ground, but we can't call for help. As they built a camp, Lieutenant Cooper organized guards around the edges, just in time. When darkness fell, strange sounds came from the forest. Movement at the tree line, a guard shouted. Marcus grabbed his rifle and ran to look. Red eyes glowed in the darkness. Many pairs. Then the creatures charged. They looked like large wolves but had scales instead of fur. Their teeth were long like knives. The first wave hit the guards hard. Fire! Marcus shouted. The night lit up with weapon flashes. The creatures fell, but more came. One jumped at Marcus. He fired twice. The creature dropped, but not before its claws scratched his armor. When morning came, 20 more soldiers were dead. The rest were tired and scared. Our weapons don't work well, Cooper said, checking his rifle. Something in the air weakens the energy shots. Dr. Reed walked the edge of camp, studying the dead creatures. She stopped suddenly and waved Marcus over. Look at this, she said, pointing to something shiny in the dirt. It was a piece of metal with strange writing. This is not shadow technology. It's from the Taurans. Marcus frowned. The Taurans? They're part of our galactic union. Why would their equipment be here? Exactly, Reed said. Her eyes were serious. I think other missions came here before us. They just never told us. As they packed to move out, Miller found more pieces of old equipment. Some had dried blood on them. Sir, he called to Marcus. I found a soldier's tag. It's from the 42nd Battalion. They were reported lost in a training accident last year. Marcus felt cold inside. He gathered the officers together. Listen carefully, he said quietly. We've been lied to. This isn't the first mission to this planet, and I doubt the shadows are really here at all. Then why send us? Cooper asked. I don't know, Marcus answered. But we need to find that facility. It may be our only way to get answers and get home. They moved out in formation, 360 soldiers now, heading toward the coordinates they have been given. Ahead of them, the land dropped into a deep canyon with glowing rocks. Strange sounds echoed from below. They began their descent, unaware of the watching eyes following their every move. The canyon wall stretched high above them as they climbed down narrow paths. Strange blue-green moss covered the rocks. It glowed faintly in the shadows. Don't touch the moss, Dr. Reed warned after quick tests. It releases spores that might get through our filters. The deeper they went, the stranger the canyon became. Large crystal formations jutted from the walls. They shimmered with colors that seemed to move inside them. Beautiful, a soldier said, reaching toward one. Step back, Marcus ordered sharply, but it was too late. When the soldier's hand touched the crystal, he screamed. His body shook. Then he turned and fired his weapon at the soldier next to him. Take him down, Cooper shouted. Before anyone could shoot, the soldier collapsed. His eyes were open but empty. He's gone, Dr. Reed said after checking him. The crystals did something to his mind. Marcus ordered everyone to stay away from the crystals. But as they moved deeper, the formations became more common. The canyon floor was now covered with them. Our equipment is failing, Miller reported. His communication gear showed strange readings. Something is interfering with the signals. Soldiers began to whisper to each other. Some claimed they heard voices coming from the crystals. Others said they saw shadows moving where there should be none. Keep it together, Marcus told them. It's just the planet playing tricks on us. But he too felt something strange, a pressure in his head, whispers at the edge of his hearing. 3 hours later, a soldier fired into the group, screaming about monsters. 2 people died before Marcus could stop him. He said the crystals were talking to him, Cooper explained, telling him we were all infected. More incidents followed. Soldiers attacked each other or wandered off into side tunnels, never to return. By midday, they had lost 20 more people. Then they found the cave. It was enormous. The ceiling rose so high they couldn't see it. The walls were smooth, too smooth to be natural. Strange lines ran across the surface in patterns. "This is artificial," Dr. Reed said, excitement in her voice despite everything. "Someone built this." As they entered the large cave, lights suddenly came on. Not bright, but enough to see better. The lights ran along the patterns on the walls. "Movement," a scout called out. Many targets approaching from the north tunnel. Marcus ordered defensive positions. They formed a half-circle, weapons ready. What came out of the tunnel wasn't the shadows. It wasn't any alien species they knew. They were machines, walking metal things with multiple legs and weapons attached to their bodies. "Open fire," Marcus commanded. Their weapons hit the machines, but did little damage. The machines returned fire with beams of blue light. Where the beams hit, soldiers simply disappeared, turned to dust. "Fall back," Marcus shouted. "Find cover." They retreated, firing as they went. The machines followed steadily, never hurrying, never stopping. Cooper found a small passage they could defend. "Through here, Captain." Half the remaining soldiers made it through before the machines reached them. Marcus stood at the entrance, firing to cover the retreat. "Captain, come on," Miller called. Marcus backed up slowly, still firing. A beam hit near his foot. Pain shot up his leg as part of his boot disappeared. When they finally sealed the passage behind them, Marcus counted their numbers. Only 180 soldiers remained. Dr. Reed was examining a piece of one of the machines they had managed to damage. "This isn't shadow technology," she said quietly. "This is far older, maybe tens of thousands of years old. But it's still working perfectly." "What is this place?" Cooper asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I think," Reed said slowly, "we've found the facility. But it's not what we were told. This entire canyon system might be part of it. And I don't think the shadows built it. I think they found it, just like us." Marcus looked at the dark tunnel ahead of them. The walls hummed softly, as if the whole place was alive and thinking. "Then who did build it?" he asked. Reed shook her head. "I don't know. But whoever they were far more advanced than any species we've ever encountered." The canyon walls stretched high above them as they climbed down narrow paths. Strange blue-green moss covered the rocks. It glowed faintly in the shadows. "Don't touch the moss," Dr. Reed warned after quick tests. "It releases spores that might get through our filters." The deeper they went, the stranger the canyon became. Large crystal formations jutted from the walls. They shimmered with colors that seemed to move inside them. "Beautiful," a soldier said, reaching toward one. "Step back," Marcus ordered sharply. But it was too late. When the soldier's hand touched the crystal, he screamed. His body shook. Then he turned and fired his weapon at the soldier next to him. "Take him down," Cooper shouted. Before anyone could shoot, the soldier collapsed. His eyes were open but empty. "He's gone," Dr. Reed said after checking him. The crystals did something to his mind. Marcus ordered everyone to stay away from the crystals. But as they moved deeper, the formations became more common. The canyon floor was now covered with them. "Our equipment is failing," Miller reported. His communication gear showed strange readings. "Something is interfering with the signals." Soldiers began to whisper to each other. Some claimed they heard voices coming from the crystals. Others said they saw shadows moving where there should be none. "Keep it together," Marcus told them. "It's just the planet playing tricks on us." But he too felt something strange, a pressure in his head, whispers at the edge of his hearing. 3 hours later, a soldier fired into the group, screaming about monsters. 2 people died before Marcus could stop him. He said the crystals were talking to him, Cooper explained, telling him we were all infected. More incidents followed. Soldiers attacked each other or wandered off into side tunnels, never to return. By midday, they had lost 20 more people. Then they found the cave. It was enormous. The ceiling rose so high they couldn't see it. The walls were smooth, too smooth to be natural. Strange lines ran across the surface in patterns. "This is artificial," Dr. Reed said, excitement in her voice despite everything. "Someone built this." As they entered the large cave, lights suddenly came on. Not bright, but enough to see better. The lights ran along the patterns on the walls. "Movement," a scout called out. Many targets approaching from the north tunnel. Marcus ordered defensive positions. They formed a half-circle, weapons ready. What came out of the tunnel wasn't the shadows. It wasn't any alien species they knew. They were machines, walking metal things with multiple legs and weapons attached to their bodies. "Open fire," Marcus commanded. Their weapons hit the machines, but did little damage. The machines returned fire with beams of blue light. Where the beams hit, soldiers simply disappeared, turned to dust. "Fall back," Marcus shouted. "Find cover." They retreated, firing as they went. The machines followed steadily, never hurrying, never stopping. Cooper found a small passage they could defend. "Through here, Captain." Half the remaining soldiers made it through before the machines reached them. Marcus stood at the entrance, firing to cover the retreat. "Captain, come on," Miller called. Marcus backed up slowly, still firing. A beam hit near his foot. Pain shot up his leg as part of his boot disappeared. When they finally sealed the passage behind them, Marcus counted their numbers. Only 180 soldiers remained. Dr. Reed was examining a piece of one of the machines they had managed to damage. "This isn't shadow technology," she said quietly. "This is far older, maybe tens of thousands of years old, but it's still working perfectly." "What is this place?" Cooper asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I think," Reed said slowly, "we found the facility. But it's not what we were told. This entire canyon system might be part of it. And I don't think the shadows built it. I think they found it, just like us." Marcus looked at the dark tunnel ahead of them. The walls hummed softly, as if the whole place was alive and thinking. "Then who did build it?" he asked. Reed shook her head. "I don't know. But whoever they were far more advanced than any species we've ever encountered." Red lights flashed throughout the facility. A loud alarm sound echoed in every corridor. Marcus and his small group ran, trying to find a way out. "The timer shows 20 minutes left," Cooper said, checking the remote detonator. They turned a corner and froze. 3 machine guards blocked their path. These were different from the ones they had seen before. They looked partly made of metal and partly made of flesh. "Back," Marcus shouted as the machines opened fire. Too late. 5 soldiers fell instantly. The rest returned fire and destroyed 1 machine, but the other 2 kept coming. Meanwhile, Miller led his larger group through different corridors. The signals in his comm unit grew stronger. Strange pictures formed in his mind when he listened closely. "This way," he told the others, following the mental map the signals were creating. "I think I can find an exit." A soldier grabbed his arm. "How do you know?" "We're lost. The facility is talking to me," Miller tried to explain. "Not with words, but with images. It's showing me things." "He's gone crazy," someone muttered. But with no better options, they followed him. Miller led them to a large round room with doors on all sides. In the center was a pillar of swirling light. "What is that?" a soldier asked. Miller stared at it. "It's the heart of the facility, its main computer or brain." As they watched, the pillar projected images around them. They saw different planets, different species fighting and dying. They saw tests and experiments. "It's showing us its purpose," Miller said quietly. "This whole planet is an experiment. It brings species here to test them." "Test them for what?" someone asked. Before Miller could answer, parts of the floor opened. New machines rose up. These looked even more biological than mechanical. They had weapons for arms and moved with terrifying speed. "Run," Miller shouted. They scattered toward the different doors. Many didn't make it. Miller and 12 others escaped through one door, while the rest of the group was cut down. Back with Marcus, the fight against the machine guards continued. Marcus, Reed, Cooper, and 5 remaining soldiers retreated down a side passage. "The signals are changing," Reed said, looking at her scanner. "The facility is waking up more systems." They found themselves in a small control room. Strange screens showed views of the entire facility. They watched in horror as Miller's group was split up, and many were killed. "There's Miller," Cooper pointed to one screen. "He's still alive." Marcus studied the other screens. "The whole place is coming to life. And look, the nuclear charges we planted are being moved." Reed examined the controls. "Captain, I think this facility isn't just collecting samples. It's studying how different species fight. It's learning from us." "Learning what?" Cooper asked. "How to be better at killing," Reed said grimly. "Each species that comes here teaches it new techniques, new weapons, new strategies." A huge explosion suddenly rocked the facility. Alarms blared louder. "That wasn't our nukes," Marcus said. Something else exploded. Reed looked at her scanner. "The charges we planted are destabilizing. They're going to blow sooner than planned." Marcus made a quick decision. "Cooper, take Reed and the others. Find Miller if you can. Get to the surface." "What about you?" Cooper asked. "I'll try to delay these machines, give you time to escape." Marcus checked his weapon. "That's an order, Lieutenant." Cooper nodded reluctantly. "Yes, sir." As they prepared to leave, Reed touched Marcus's arm. "Captain, there's something else you should know. The signals suggest this isn't the only facility like this. There are others on different planets. This is part of something bigger." Marcus looked grim. "Then it's even more important that someone gets out to warn Earth. Now go." As Cooper led the group away, Marcus turned to face the corridor, where machine sounds were getting closer. He set up his last grenades as traps and took position. The first machine came around the corner. Marcus fired directly at its eye sensors. It stumbled but kept coming. More followed behind it. Marcus fought with everything he had, knowing he was buying time with his life. Miller ran with the 12 soldiers who had survived. His comm unit buzzed constantly with strange signals. The mental images were clearer now. He could see a path to the surface. "This way," he shouted, turning down a corridor that glowed green. Behind them, heavy footsteps followed. More machines were hunting them. "We need to move faster," a soldier named Adam said. "The whole place feels like it's coming apart." He was right. The walls shook. Pieces of ceiling fell around them. The nuclear charges were becoming unstable, and something else was happening too. The facility was changing itself. Meanwhile, Cooper, Reed, and 5 others tried to find their way through different corridors. "Miller's signal is coming from that direction," Reed said, pointing to her left. "How far to the surface?" Cooper asked. Reed checked her scanner. "At least 2 miles up. We'll never make it before the charges explode." A loud boom shook the facility again. One of the soldiers looked at his timer. 10 minutes until the main charges blow," he reported. Cooper made a choice. "We split up. Adams, you and Reed take these 2 and head for the surface. Parker and I will find Miller." Reed started to argue, but Cooper cut her off. "Someone has to warn Earth about these facilities. That's your job now. We'll bring Miller and meet you if we can." Reed nodded. She handed Cooper her scanner. "This will help you find him." As they separated, Neither group saw the strange shadow following them along the ceiling. Miller's group reached a large vertical shaft. Above them, they could see light. Actual daylight from the surface. "There's our way out," Miller pointed up. "The maintenance ladders on the wall should hold us." As they started to climb, a metal door slid shut far above them, blocking the light. "No," Miller shouted. The walls of the shaft began to move. Small holes opened and strange mist poured out. "Gas," a soldier yelled. "Check your filters." Too late for some. 3 soldiers fell from the ladder, their bodies twitching as the gas touched their skin. It wasn't just poisonous to breathe, it burned through their suits. "Keep climbing." Miller ordered the remaining 8. "We need to find another exit." They climbed to a side passage and pulled themselves in. As they ran down this new corridor, Miller's comm caught a familiar voice. "Miller, do you copy? This is Cooper." "Lieutenant, I read you." Miller responded. "We're trying to find a way out." "Stay where you are," Cooper said. "We're coming to you." Then we all head for the surface together. But staying still wasn't an option. More machines appeared behind them, these looking even more like living creatures than the earlier ones. "We have to keep moving," Miller told Cooper. "Following the signals. I think they're showing me the way out." One by one, the soldiers with Miller fell behind to hold off the pursuing machines. Each gave their life to buy the others a few more precious minutes. "Jenkins, come on." Miller called to one soldier who had stopped to set up a last stand at a narrow doorway. "Go," Jenkins shouted back, firing at the approaching machines. "I'll hold them here." Miller and the last 3 soldiers ran on. Another explosion rocked the facility. The timer showed 5 minutes remaining. Cooper and Parker finally found them at a junction of corridors. "Where are the others?" Cooper asked, seeing only 4 people with Miller. "Gone," Miller said simply. "What about the captain?" Cooper shook his head. "Staying behind to buy us time." A huge tremor nearly knocked them off their feet. The facility was breaking apart around them. "The charges are going to blow early," Parker warned, checking the timer. 3 minutes. "This way," Miller said, following the strange map in his mind. "There's a transport shaft that might take us to the surface." As they ran, another soldier fell to a hidden trap in the floor. Then Parker was hit by a beam from a ceiling gun. Only Miller, Cooper, and 1 soldier named Turner remained. They'd reached the transport shaft, a smooth tube leading upward. "It's like an elevator," Miller explained, "but I don't know how to activate it." Cooper examined the wall panel. "Maybe this." A massive explosion cut him off. The shaft trembled violently. "That was one of our charges," Turner shouted. The floor beneath them began to rise. The transport was working. But as they moved upward, something large climbed into the shaft below them. In the glow of emergency lights, they saw Captain Marcus, but he was changed. Parts of his body were now metal. His eyes glowed red. "Captain," Cooper whispered in horror. The thing that had been Marcus looked up at them and began to climb with inhuman speed. The thing that once was Captain Marcus climbed the shaft with terrible speed. Its fingers dug into metal like it was soft clay. "Shoot it," Cooper yelled. They fired down, but the bullets seemed to sink into Marcus without effect. The transport platform moved too slowly. Marcus would reach them before they got to the top. "I'll hold him off," Turner said. He had 1 grenade left. "You 2 keep going." Before Miller could stop him, Turner jumped down toward Marcus. He pulled the pin on his grenade and wrapped his arms around the changed captain. The explosion shook the entire shaft. When the smoke cleared, there was no sign of Turner. But Marcus still climbed, missing an arm but seemingly unbothered by it. "The facility changed him," Miller said. "It's using him like a weapon." The platform reached the top and opened into a large room. Daylight streamed through cracks in the ceiling. They were near the surface. "Run." Cooper pushed Miller toward a tunnel that led upward. They sprinted as fast as they could. Behind them, Marcus pulled himself up from the shaft. He let out a sound that was not human anymore, a high electronic shriek. The tunnel sloped upward, becoming steeper. They had to climb using hands and feet. Miller's lungs burned. His muscles screamed with pain, but he kept moving. There, Cooper pointed. Above them was an opening to the outside world. The sickly yellow sky of the planet had never looked so beautiful. As they neared the exit, a massive explosion rocked the entire facility. The main nuclear charges had finally detonated. The tunnel began to collapse. "Jump!" Cooper shouted. He pushed Miller toward the opening with all his strength. Miller flew through the air and landed outside on hard ground. He turned back to see Cooper half out of the tunnel, reaching toward him. "Lieutenant." Miller grabbed Cooper's hand and pulled. Too late. Something grabbed Cooper from behind. Marcus's remaining hand closed around Cooper's leg. "Go!" Cooper shouted. He used his free leg to kick at Miller, pushing him away. Someone has to make it back. The tunnel collapsed completely, burying Cooper and Marcus in tons of rock and dirt. Miller stared at the collapsed entrance in shock. Then the ground began to shake beneath him. The entire area was caving in as the underground facility imploded. He ran blindly, not caring which direction, just away from the collapsing ground. His oxygen was running low. His body was at its limit. After what seemed like hours, Miller found himself on a ridge overlooking a vast smoking crater where part of the facility had been. But the destruction wasn't complete. He could see movement in some areas, new machines emerging from underground tunnels. His comm unit suddenly came alive. "This is Rescue Shuttle Delta 7. Any survivors, please respond." Miller couldn't believe his ears. "This is Private Miller. I'm alive. I need extraction." "Copy that. We have your signal. Hold position." 30 minutes later, a shuttle appeared in the sky. As it landed near him, Miller saw Dr. Reed standing in the doorway. "Reed, you made it," Miller cried. "Just me and one other," she said as she helped him aboard. "You're the only one we found alive." The shuttle took off quickly, racing for orbit. Through the window, Miller watched the planet grow smaller. The facility was still active down there, still evolving, still learning. 6 weeks later, Miller stood before the Galactic Union High Command. His body had healed, but his mind still heard the strange signals sometimes in his dreams. "Private Miller," General Roberts addressed him. "Your report is troubling." "It's the truth, sir," Miller said. "The planet wasn't a shadow facility. It was something much older and more dangerous, and there are more planets like it." The general looked uncomfortable. "We've reviewed Dr. Reed's data. It appears there may be hundreds of these testing grounds throughout the galaxy." Another officer spoke up. "The question is, what do we do now?" Miller stepped forward. "Sir, I believe Captain Marcus is still alive down there, in some form, and I believe I can understand the signals better than anyone else. I volunteer to lead the next mission." The room fell silent. Then the general nodded slowly. "Very well, Lieutenant Miller. The mission is yours." As Miller left the room with his new rank and impossible task, he knew one thing for certain. 500 had gone to that Deathworld. Only he had returned. But next time, he wouldn't be the only one coming back.